It was a Sunday evening, and the whole family had gathered at my house for dinner, something we hadn't done in months. My daughter, Emily, insisted on preparing the soup. She smiled sweetly as she ladled it into bowls, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of unease that I couldn't ignore. She'd been distant lately, secretive even, and I'd heard whispers that she'd been struggling financially. Still, I trusted her. She was my daughter, after all. But that night, as she stood by the stove, I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught her slipping a small packet of white powder into my bowl, then quickly stirring it. My heart went cold. She didn't notice me watching. I stayed calm, pretending not to see. When she placed the bowl in front of me, I simply smiled. "Smells great, honey," I said, my voice steady. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up her spoon. I took mine too, but before the first sip, I quietly switched our bowls. Her eyes widened just a little, not enough for anyone else to notice, but I saw it. I kept talking, laughing, pretending everything was normal. Within minutes, she began to look dizzy, her face pale. "Dad," she whispered, her voice weak. I leaned forward, still smiling. "What's wrong, Emily?" I asked softly. The rest of the family turned toward her concerned, and in that moment, I knew the truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. It all happened so fast, yet every second felt like slow motion. Emily's spoon clattered against her bowl, her hands trembling violently. "Emily, are you all right?" my wife gasped, rushing to her side. My son stood frozen, confusion painted across his face. I didn't move. I just watched quietly, every muscle in my body tense, my mind racing. I had known for days that something was off. The strange calls Emily was getting, the way she avoided eye contact, her sudden visits after months of silence. But never, not once, did I imagine she'd try to harm me. Or maybe I did. Maybe deep down, I knew it was coming. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, I put Emily in charge of some family finances while I recovered. She was always bright, ambitious, the kind of girl who wanted to control her own destiny. But recently, I'd discovered discrepancies in my accounts, thousands of dollars missing. I confronted her gently, but she denied everything, insisting it was a bank error. I didn't push it further. I wanted to trust my daughter. That trust, I realized tonight, had been a mistake. As she sat there, trembling and confused, I could almost see the panic in her eyes as the truth dawned. The very thing she had planned for me was now inside her. I leaned forward slightly, my tone calm and measured. "Emily," I said softly, "what did you put in the soup?" Her eyes darted to mine, filled with terror. "Dad, I didn't," she stammered, her words breaking apart. The rest of the family looked from her to me, bewildered. "What's going on here?" my son demanded. I sighed deeply, my eyes never leaving Emily. "I think Emily might have something to tell us," I said, voice low. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. My wife's sister, who had joined us for dinner, screamed and called for an ambulance. I stayed seated. My hands were steady as I picked up her bowl and placed it gently on the table. Everyone was panicking, everyone except me, because I knew exactly what was going to happen next. You see, I had installed a new set of security cameras in the kitchen 2 weeks ago after suspecting something strange. The footage from tonight, her slipping that powder into my soup, was already uploaded to a private cloud drive, linked to my security app. All I had to do was press one button. I did. The live stream went public. My home Wi-Fi had been connected to my social page for weeks for a charity cooking event. Now, instead of a fundraiser, the audience saw something else. My daughter poisoning my meal. Within seconds, comments started flooding in. People were horrified. Some thought it was fake.
Others recognized Emily. She had her own small following online, a life coach, influencer type who preached about honesty, positivity, and love. And now the whole world could see who she really was. The paramedics arrived fast. They took her away while the family stood in shock. My son kept asking me, "Dad, how could she do this? Why?" I didn't answer. I just watched the flashing lights fade down the street. That night, I sat alone in my study, staring at my phone as thousands of notifications rolled in. The video had gone viral. Millions of views, news outlets picking it up, reporters calling. "Father's quick thinking exposes daughter's shocking betrayal." That was one headline. But the truth is, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel angry either. Just hollow. The girl I raised, the one who once held my hand at her mother's funeral, had become someone I no longer recognized. Still, something didn't add up. Why would she go this far? Why risk everything? Then around midnight, I got an anonymous email. The subject line read, "She wasn't working alone." My blood ran cold. I opened it. Inside was a single attachment, a video clip of Emily meeting someone in a parking lot 3 nights earlier. The man she was talking to was no stranger. It was my business partner, Richard, my closest friend of 20 years. They were exchanging something, a small envelope and a briefcase. I watched the footage over and over, each time feeling the betrayal cut deeper. So this wasn't just about family. This was about money, control, and revenge. But what they didn't realize was that I had already begun recording everything. Every call, every message, every word. They thought they were ahead. They had no idea I'd been 2 steps ahead from the start. The only thing I hadn't predicted was that she'd actually go through with it. I poured myself a drink, staring at the half-empty glass. "You should have known better, Emily," I whispered to myself. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Because if Richard was involved, this was bigger than a family betrayal. And I wasn't going to stop until I knew exactly how deep it went. Tomorrow, I'd visit Emily in the hospital. She'd survive. Barely. But when she opened her eyes and saw me standing there, she'd know one thing for sure. Her nightmare had only just begun.
The next morning came with a heavy silence that filled every corner of the house. The air smelled faintly of soup and regret. I hadn't slept all night, and the sunlight that crept through the blinds felt almost intrusive, as if it was exposing everything I'd been trying to keep hidden. My phone buzzed endlessly with calls from reporters and messages from friends who didn't know what to say. I ignored them all. There was only one place I needed to be: the hospital. When I arrived, the nurse at the front desk looked startled, as if she recognized me. "Room 304, she said softly. "She's awake." I nodded and walked down the hall. Every step echoed. When I entered her room, Emily was lying there, pale, weak, but alive. Her eyes met mine instantly, wide, terrified, and filled with guilt. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. I stood by the window, looking out for a moment before turning back to her. "You should rest," I said. "You've been through a lot." She swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to drug me?" I cut her off sharply, my voice calm but cold. "You didn't mean to poison your own father? To betray your family in front of the entire world?" Her lips trembled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said quietly. "Richard said you—" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what she'd just revealed. I stepped closer. "Richard said what?" I asked. She turned her head away, crying silently. "He told me you stole from him," she finally whispered. "He said you ruined his life. He said if I didn't help him, he'd go to the police, and that you would end up in prison." I stared at her for a long time, feeling something inside me twist. Richard had always been manipulative, but using my daughter? That was a new level of evil. "Emily," I said softly, "do you even know what was in that packet?" She shook her head weakly. "He said it would just make you sick, just enough to embarrass you during dinner, to make you look weak in front of everyone." My jaw tightened. So she hadn't planned to kill me, but still, the betrayal cut deep. "And you believed him?" I asked. "After everything I've done for you?" She broke down completely. "I was desperate, Dad. He said he'd help me pay off my debts, that he'd protect me. I didn't think it would go this far." I sighed, looking down at her. "You thought wrong." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the faint beeping of the monitor beside her. I turned to leave, but before I could reach the door, she spoke again. "Dad, are you going to forgive me?" I stopped, but didn't turn around. "It depends," I said quietly, "on whether you tell me everything." She hesitated, then whispered, "There's a USB drive in my apartment, hidden behind the picture frame on my desk. Richard made me record everything, the meetings, the transfers, everything. He said it was insurance, in case you tried to fight back." That was all I needed to hear. I left the room without another word. I drove straight to her apartment. The place was a mess. Clothes on the floor, mail scattered, her life in disarray. I found the picture frame easily. It was a photo of her and her mother when she was a little girl, both smiling. I reached behind it and pulled out the small USB drive. Plugging it into my laptop, I watched the files load one by one. Dozens of videos, recordings, transactions, and emails, all showing Richard's plan to take over my company by discrediting me. Emily had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. My chest tightened with both fury and pity. She had fallen into his trap, but now I had everything I needed to destroy him. I copied all the files, then backed them up twice. That night, I sat in my office, the dim light casting shadows across the room. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Richard. The subject line read, "You lose." I attached a few of the most damning files and wrote, "By the time you read this, every news outlet in the country will have the full story. You should start packing." Then I hit send. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. Richard called, then called again. I didn't answer. The next morning, his arrest was all over the news. Fraud, embezzlement, and attempted homicide conspiracy. Everything came crashing down on him. As for Emily, she was released from the hospital a few days later, but she didn't come home. She couldn't face anyone, not after what happened. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter than ever. Sometimes I'd sit at the dinner table, staring at 2 empty bowls, wondering where it all went wrong. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Emily. The handwriting was shaky. "Dad, I know I can never undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm getting help. I've started therapy. I'm trying to become someone Mom would be proud of. I hope one day you'll forgive me. Love, Emily." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. I didn't cry. I just looked at her words and thought about how far we both had fallen, and how maybe, just maybe, we could still find our way back. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my wife's old photo. Then I whispered, "Her nightmare began that night, but maybe, someday, it will end."
A few months passed, and life slowly settled into something that almost resembled peace. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't over. The world had seen what happened,
But the truth always has deeper roots, darker corners that light doesn't easily reach. My company had survived the scandal, barely. The board forced Richard out completely, and I stepped down soon after, officially citing health and family priorities. The real reason? I couldn't stand walking into that building anymore. Every hallway, every meeting room reminded me of the betrayal that nearly destroyed everything I'd built. I moved to a smaller house on the outskirts of town, a quiet place near the woods where no one recognized me. The neighbors knew me only as Mr. Carter. That's how I liked it. For a while, it worked. I spent my days gardening, reading, and sometimes just staring at the forest, trying to forget. But forgetting isn't easy when your past keeps knocking. One evening, I received a small package on my porch. No sender name, just my address typed neatly on a label. Inside was a plain envelope and a flash drive. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with one line written on it. "You think it's over, but it's not." My stomach tightened. I plugged in the flash drive, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Security footage, grainy but clear enough. A man in a hospital uniform walking into Emily's room late one night weeks ago. He wasn't part of the hospital staff. He placed something under her bed, then left quietly. The timestamp matched the night before she was discharged. My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone and called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. The next morning, I drove straight to the city and went to her apartment. The door was unlocked, and the place looked exactly as I'd left it months ago, except for one thing. Her laptop was open on the table, the screen frozen on a paused video call. The last frame showed Emily's face. She looked scared, like she was arguing with someone just before the call cut off. I checked her messages. The last one she'd sent was to me. "Dad, I think someone's watching me." My chest tightened. I immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of her, no struggle, no clue. She was just gone. That night, I went through the flash drive again, frame by frame, looking for any clue. Then I saw it, a small tattoo on the man's wrist. I'd seen it before, years ago, during one of Richard's business meetings with a group of investors. It was the same symbol, a black serpent coiled around a dagger. I remembered it because it wasn't just a tattoo. It was the insignia of a secretive financial group, people who dealt in offshore accounts, blackmail, and corporate sabotage. I realized Richard hadn't acted alone. He'd been part of something far bigger. Maybe when he went down, he took too many secrets with him. Maybe they wanted them back, and Emily was the key. I leaned back in my chair, my hands shaking. For the first time in months, I felt real fear. Not for myself, but for her. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and sat in silence thinking. Whoever sent that package wanted me to know something. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was bait. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. I poured myself a drink, then opened my laptop and started digging. Old business files, offshore transactions, encrypted folders Richard had shared years ago. There had to be something that connected him to them. Hours passed. Just as I was about to give up, I found it, a hidden document titled Project Serpent. Password protected, of course, but Richard had always been predictable. His passwords were usually personal. I tried Emily's birthday. Nothing. I tried mine. Still nothing. Then I remembered something. His dog Max, who died a few years back. Max 2020. The file opened. My heart skipped a beat. Inside were hundreds of pages, names, account numbers, offshore connections, and one project title that caught my eye. Phase 2, Containment. My name was on the list, and Emily's. There were notes describing asset leverage and elimination if compromised. I realized then what it meant. Richard had planned for this long before his arrest. If either of us became a liability, they'd take us out quietly. I closed the laptop, the reality hitting me like a brick. Emily wasn't missing. She'd been taken. The question was,
Why send me the flash drive? Was someone trying to help me or warn me I was next? I decided not to call the police again. Not yet. They'd think I was paranoid, maybe even delusional. Instead, I reached out to the only person I still trusted, Michael, a retired investigator who'd worked with me years ago. He owed me a favor, and he was the kind of man who didn't ask too many questions. When I explained everything, there was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Carter, if what you're saying is true, you need to disappear for a while. These people don't make threats, they finish jobs." I looked out the window at the dark woods behind my house. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly. "They have my daughter." He sighed. "Then you'd better be ready for what comes next." That night, I'd barely slept. Every sound, every shadow outside felt like it was moving. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new message. No number. Just a video attachment. I hesitated before opening it. It was short. Less than 10 seconds. Emily, sitting in a dark room, whispering, "Dad, don't trust anyone." Then static. I froze. My hands trembled as the video replayed over and over. The timestamp was from an hour ago, which meant she was still alive.
I didn't move for almost a full minute after watching that video. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in the quiet of the house. Emily was alive, but where? Who was holding her? And how would they manage to contact me without leaving a trace? I replayed the clip again, slowing it down, examining every frame. Behind her, I could barely make out a faint light flickering through what looked like metal bars, maybe a window or a vent. The walls were gray, concrete, cold. There was a faint hum, mechanical, almost like a generator. I took a screenshot and enhanced it. The pattern of the concrete wasn't like a normal wall. It looked industrial, maybe underground. A basement, I murmured to myself. Or worse, a bunker. I forwarded the clip to Michael with one message: "She's alive. Find the location of this video." 10 minutes later, he called. "I'll need to trace the data packet. Whoever sent this used a private relay. Could take a few hours." "Do it," I said. "Money's not an issue." "It never was. But Carter, you need to understand, if she's in their hands, they won't keep her long. These people tie loose ends fast." His words cut deep, but I didn't show it. "Then we don't give them the chance." After hanging up, I grabbed my jacket and opened the drawer where I kept my old revolver. It had been years since I'd even touched it, but I still remembered how heavy it felt in my hand. I checked the cylinder. Fully loaded. "Just in case," I whispered. The hours dragged on like days. I couldn't eat, couldn't rest. My house felt smaller, the shadows longer. Then, around 6 a.m., my phone buzzed again. It was Michael. "I found something," he said. The video originated near the old industrial district, east side of town. There's a decommissioned facility there, used to be a pharmaceutical plant. It's been abandoned for years. "Send me the address." "Carter, wait, you can't just walk in there. If they're still using it, you'll get yourself killed." "If I don't go, she dies anyway," I said, flatly. There was silence on the line, then a sigh. "All right, I'll meet you there in an hour." The drive was long and silent. The city woke up around me, people heading to work, joggers, coffee shops opening, but none of it felt real. My world had narrowed down to one goal: find Emily. When I reached the outskirts of the industrial zone, fog hung low over the cracked asphalt. The air smelled of rust and decay. The old factory loomed ahead, massive and lifeless, its windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti. I parked a few blocks away and waited. Soon, Michael arrived, grayer than I remembered, but still sharp-eyed and steady. He handed me a small earpiece. "We'll go in quiet. You cover the north side, I'll check the loading bay. If we find her, we get her out. No hesitation." I nodded. As we approached the building, the silence was eerie. Only the sound of our footsteps echoed through the fog. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the scent of oil and mildew. Rusted machinery stood like skeletons in the dark. We split up. My flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing old equipment, scattered papers, a trail of footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. I followed them down a narrow corridor to a locked metal door. The hum I'd heard in the video, faint but steady, was coming from behind it. I took a deep breath, gripped the handle, and pushed. The door creaked open to reveal a small room, dimly lit by a flickering bulb. And there she was, Emily, tied to a chair, pale but awake, her eyes widening the moment she saw me. "Dad!" she gasped, her voice trembling. I rushed forward, cutting the ropes. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." But before I could pull her up, she whispered, "Dad, it's a trap." My blood froze. What? And then I heard it. The click of a gun behind me. "Step away from her, Carter." The voice was low, calm, familiar. I turned slowly, and there he was. Richard. Alive. My pulse spiked. "You're supposed to be in prison." He smiled faintly, the same smug expression I'd seen in every board meeting we ever had. "I built that company, Carter. You took it from me. All I did was even the score." "By using my daughter?" I growled. "By turning her into a criminal?" He shrugged. "Collateral damage. She made her choice." I clenched my fists. "Let her go, Richard. This ends tonight." "Oh, it will. But not the way you think." He raised his gun. In that split second, a sharp crack echoed through the room, a gunshot. Richard's face twisted in shock before he crumpled to the floor. Smoke rose from the barrel of Michael's gun at the doorway. "You're welcome," he said flatly. But before I could even breathe in relief, another sound filled the air. Metal clicking, a faint beeping. Emily's eyes went wide. "Dad, the floor!" I looked down. A small red light blinked under the chair she'd been tied to. A bomb. "Move!" I shouted, grabbing her arm. Michael lunged toward the hallway as the first explosion tore through the room. The blast threw us all to the ground. Dust and smoke filled the air. My ears rang as I crawled toward Emily, coughing, shouting her name. Through the haze, I saw her, alive, shaken, bleeding from a cut on her forehead. I dragged her toward the exit, half carrying, half pulling her. Behind us, fire roared. Michael stumbled after us, limping but alive. We burst into the cold morning air just as another explosion ripped through the building, sending debris raining down. We collapsed on the ground outside, gasping, covered in soot. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the sound of sirens in the distance. Emily clinged to me, trembling. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's not over. They're still out there." I looked at the burning ruins of the factory and nodded slowly. "I know. But they just made their biggest mistake. They came after my family."
The flames behind us rose higher, licking the morning sky as sirens grew louder in the distance. I held Emily close, feeling her heart pound against mine. She was trembling, not just from fear, but from shock. Her eyes stared blankly at the burning factory, the place where she'd nearly died, where the truth had exploded into chaos. Michael limped toward us, his jacket torn and face covered in soot. "We need to move," he said, coughing. "If that blast draws attention, the rest of them won't be far behind." "The rest of them?" I asked, tightening my grip on Emily's shoulder. He nodded grimly. "You think Richard ran this whole thing alone? No, he was working under someone. I've seen this kind of operation before. When a middleman dies, the people above him clean up everything, and everyone." Emily shuddered. "You mean they'll come after us?" "They already have," Michael said. He looked around, scanning the tree line. "We need to get off the grid now." I helped Emily into the car, started the engine, and sped away from the smoking ruins. As we drove, the morning light broke through the clouds, but it didn't feel like hope, it felt like exposure. Every open road felt dangerous,
every passing car suspicious. Emily was silent for most of the ride, staring out the window, her face pale and distant. Finally, she whispered, "Dad, I heard them talking before you came. They called someone, a woman. They said she was the director." I frowned. "The director?" "She's the one who gave the orders," she said. "She told them to keep me alive until Richard returned. She wanted him to finish the message." I glanced at Michael in the rearview mirror. His jaw tightened. "I've heard that name before," he muttered, "years ago, back when I was still on the force. There was a case, corporate disappearances, blackmail, high-level fraud. But everything got buried. Every witness either vanished or recanted. The only clue we ever had was a code name, the director." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Then she's the one behind all this." "Probably," he said. "And if she knows Richard's dead, she'll make her next move fast." We drove for hours, taking back roads, avoiding highways. By evening, we reached an old cabin deep in the forest, one of Michael's safe houses from his investigation days. The place smelled of dust and pine, but it was quiet and hidden, perfect for disappearing. Inside, Emily sat by the fireplace, silent. Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "Dad, I'm sorry. For everything." I knelt beside her and took her hand. "You don't need to apologize anymore. You were used, manipulated. None of this is your fault." "But it is," she said, tears falling. "If I hadn't believed Richard, none of this would have happened. Mom's memory, your company, everything you worked for. I destroyed it all." I shook my head. "No, Emily. What's destroyed can be rebuilt. What matters is that you're alive, that we still have a chance." She nodded slowly, though I could see she didn't believe it yet. Later that night, while Emily slept, I sat with Michael at the table, the only light coming from a single oil lamp. "You think she's safe here?" I asked. "For now," he said. "But once the director finds out you're still alive, this place won't stay secret long. You need to prepare for what's coming." "What's coming?" I asked quietly. He looked at me with tired eyes. "War." I didn't respond. The word echoed in my mind long after he said it. The next morning, I went through the files from the flash drive again, searching for any mention of the director. Near the end of one document, buried in a list of encrypted transactions, I found it, a series of wire transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Each one was signed under the alias DR. But one transfer had a location tag, accidentally left unmasked, Lansbury Institute, D.C. I showed it to Michael. He whistled softly. "Lansbury's not an institute. It's a front, a private intelligence firm, high-end corporate espionage. They have government ties, contracts, and more money than God. So she's hiding there, right under the system's nose." Michael frowned. "Carter, you can't just walk in there. These people have layers of protection. You try to expose her and you'll vanish before the news hits the news." I looked down at Emily, still sleeping peacefully on the couch, her face pale and calm. "Then I'll do whatever it takes," I said. "I lost too much already. I'm not losing her again." Michael leaned back, sighing. "Then we'll need help. Someone who can get us inside without raising alarms. You have someone in mind?" "Maybe," he said. "But she won't like seeing me again." He pulled out his phone and scrolled through a list of old contacts. "Her name's Claire Holt, ex-intelligence, deep cover agent. She used to run operations like this, until the director burned her and left her for dead." "You trust her?" I asked. "I trust that she hates the director more than anyone, and that's enough." 2 days later, we met her in an abandoned diner off a dusty highway. Claire was sharp, focused, and carried the kind of silence that only comes from surviving too much. "You're either very brave or very stupid to come looking for her. The director doesn't forgive. She erases." She took my daughter. I'm not letting her walk away this time. Claire studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Carter. If we're going after her, we'll do it my way. Quiet Smart, precise. She leaned forward, her voice low. But you better understand something. Once this starts, there's no going back. I met her eyes without hesitation. I'm already past that point.
Claire took a slow drag from her cigarette, the tip glowing faintly in the dim light of the diner. "Before we start," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "you need to understand what we're walking into. The director isn't just a person. She's a network, a ghost wrapped in layers of power, money, and people who'd rather die than speak her name. Once we step in, there's no safety net. Not for you, not for your daughter." I looked at her straight in the eyes. "Then let's make sure we don't fall." Claire smirked slightly. "Good answer." She slid a thin metal case across the table. Inside were fake IDs, burner phones, encrypted USB drives, and something that looked like a tiny GPS chip. "We'll need to get into the Lansbury Institute quietly," she continued. "It's not a place you can just walk into. No public access, no visitors. But they have suppliers, food, cleaning, maintenance, and every supplier leaves a door open somewhere." "And you know where that door is?" I asked. "I know where it used to be," she said. "We'll find out if it's still open." Michael leaned forward. "You think the directors really hold up there?" Claire nodded. "She runs operations through Lansbury. It's her fortress and her filter. No one gets close to her without going through those walls." "Then that's where we'll go," I said. Claire studied me, then stubbed out her cigarette. "You've got guts, Carter. I hope you've got luck, too." 2 days later, we were in D.C. again, this time under fake names. Emily stayed behind at the safe house with a trusted contact of Claire's. Leaving her behind tore at me, but I knew it was the only way she'd be safe, for now. Claire had arranged everything. We were posing as a small maintenance crew with a work order forged deep inside Lansbury's system. The IDs looked perfect, the badges had the right shine, even the uniforms smelled like cleaning chemicals. "We go in at 3 a.m., Claire said, checking her watch. "Minimal staff, motion sensors only in the West Wing, and the cameras reset every 90 seconds. That gives us small windows to move unseen. Once we're inside, we head straight to Sublevel 3, the director's private lab. That's where the data servers are. If she's there, that's where she'll be. And if she's not, then we take everything she's got and make her come to us." At exactly 3 a.m., we entered the building through a side loading bay. The security guard barely looked at us, just a nod and a yawn as we flashed our fake passes. Claire led the way, her movements silent and precise. She'd done this 1,000 times before. Inside, the air was cold, sterile. The hallways were too clean, the walls too white. Every step echoed faintly, a reminder that this place wasn't meant for ordinary people. We reached the service elevator, descended to Sublevel 3, and slipped into the corridor. It was darker down there, quieter. Every few meters, a red light blinked above a sealed door. "Server rooms ahead," Claire whispered. She pressed a small hacking device to the access panel. After a few seconds, the lock clicked open. Inside was a maze of servers, lights blinking like tiny stars in the dark. The hum of machines filled the air. "Michael, start the data copy," Claire ordered. "Carter, help me find her private terminal." We moved quickly. I searched through rows of hardware until I found one marked Executive Command, DR. My pulse spiked. "Here," I called softly. Claire rushed over, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Got it. And wait." She froze. "What?" I asked. "This system's live," she whispered. "Someone's in here right now." Before I could react, the monitor flickered. A face appeared. Sharp eyes, silver hair pulled back, calm expression. "Hello, Carter," the director said through the screen. My blood turned to ice. "You've come a long way just to die in my basement." "You're done hiding," I said. "You hurt my daughter, destroyed lives. It ends tonight." She smiled faintly. "You still think this is about you? About your little family?" Her voice was soft, controlled. "You were just leverage, a test subject. Emily was chosen because of her bloodline, her genetic code. You can't imagine how valuable she is." "What are you talking about?" I shouted. She leaned closer to the camera. "You'll find out soon enough, but you won't live to see it." Suddenly, the alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the room. "She triggered the lockdown," Claire yelled. "Move!" We grabbed what data we could and bolted down the hall as the doors began to sealing behind us. A security team flooded in, black suits, weapons drawn. Michael covered our escape, firing warning shots to slow them down. We burst into the elevator just before the door slammed shut. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before they override this," Claire said, breathing hard. "Where's the data?" I held up the drive. "Right here." "Good," she said, eyes fierce. "Then let's make sure it's worth dying for." The elevator doors opened to chaos, security everywhere, sirens screaming. We dove behind a barricade, bullets sparking off the walls. "Back exit, loading bay," Michael shouted. We sprinted through the corridor, hearts pounding, the sound of boots closing in behind us. Claire threw a smoke grenade, filling the hall with thick gray fog. We stumbled out into the freezing night, gasping for air. A black SUV waited near the edge of the lot. We jumped in, and Claire hit the gas. The tires screeched as we sped into the darkness. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. Only the sound of our breathing filled the car. Then Claire said, "She's not done. She wanted you to see her, to hear her. That means she's not finished playing with you yet." I looked down at the flash drive in my hand, the tiny object that might hold every secret, every truth about what happened to Emily. Then I guess it's time we start playing back.
The road stretched endlessly into the night, headlights carving through the fog as Claire drove faster than I thought possible. My heart still thundered from what we'd seen, the director's face, her words, the truth about Emily. I looked at the flash drive in my hand, its metal surface glinting in the dim light of the car. Somewhere inside it lay the secrets that had nearly destroyed my family. "We can't keep running," I said finally. "We have to end this." Claire glanced at me through the mirror. "You planning to waltz into the director's den again? She's got an army, Carter. You've got a flash drive and a family to protect." "Maybe," I said, staring out at the dark horizon. "But she made one mistake." "Oh yeah?" Michael asked from the back seat. "What's that?" "She let me live." Claire smirked faintly, but her eyes were serious. "Then let's make her regret it." We drove straight to one of her old contacts, a journalist named Mason Reed, someone who'd been investigating corruption inside intelligence agencies for years. When we arrived at his safe house, the place looked like a bunker of truth. Walls covered with newspaper clippings, maps, and photos of politicians with red strings connecting their faces. Mason opened the door, squinting at us. "Claire Holt, thought you were dead. That makes 2 of us," she said dryly. "We need your help." Mason eyed me suspiciously. "And who's the guy with the 1,000-yard stare?" "A father," Claire said simply, "whose daughter the director tried to erase." Mason frowned. "Come in." Inside, I placed the flash drive on his desk. "This has everything. Accounts, operations, names. She's been running a shadow network out of DC for years. Blackmail, gene research, government control. She's everywhere." Mason plugged in the drive, and lines of code began to spill across his monitors. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. "This is real. This is huge. But if I publish this, I'll be a dead man by morning." "Not if we do it right," Claire said. "We leak it through multiple encrypted channels, drop pieces at a time. No single source. Once it's out there, she can't bury it all. And while the world burns, we go for her directly." I looked at him sharply. "You mean we end it, personally?" Claire nodded slowly. "She'll be on the move soon. Lansbury won't be safe after that breach. She'll relocate, probably to one of her private facilities overseas." Mason's eyes darted to a line of data on the screen. "Hold up. There's a transmission here, encrypted, originating from Geneva." He clicked a few keys, decrypting the location. "Looks like she's already making her move." Claire looked at me. "Switzerland." I took a deep breath. "Then that's where we go." The next night, we were on a private cargo flight arranged through one of Mason's contacts.
Snow-covered mountains surrounded the airfield as we landed just before dawn. The air was biting cold, the kind that made every breath sting. Claire pointed to a valley below. That's her compound. The facility's disguised as a biotech lab, but it's heavily armed. We'll need to be ghosts again. We get in, find her, and finish this, once and for all. We moved through the frozen forest, our footsteps silent on the snow. The facility came into view. Steel walls, towers, drones sweeping the perimeter. There, Claire whispered. Back service tunnel. Old drainage line. It's still active on the grid. We crawled through the narrow tunnel, emerging inside a storage corridor. It was colder inside than out, the air humming with the low drone of machines. As we crept deeper, I could feel my pulse quicken. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every corner looked like a trap. Then we heard it. Voices. 2 guards. Claire signaled silently, and we hid in the shadows until they passed. Finally, we reached a large glass lab. And there she was. The director. Calm, composed, dressed in white, standing before a massive computer array. Her eyes met mine through the glass. You should have stayed hidden, Carter. But then again, you've always been too sentimental. It ends tonight. No more lies, no more experiments. She smirked faintly. You think you can end me? You can't even begin to understand what I've built. Emily was the beginning, proof that human evolution can be directed, perfected. My heart pounded. You used her. I elevated her. Her DNA carries markers for resistance, adaptability. She could have changed the world. You were blind to see it. You turned her life into a nightmare, I shouted. Claire had already moved behind the control panels, setting charges quietly while Michael covered the exits. The director noticed and sighed. Still the amateur spy, I see. Then she pressed a button on her console. Metal shutters slammed down around the room. You can't destroy progress, Carter. You can only delay it. Watch me, I said. And then I threw the flash drive into the system's main port. The director froze as her own data began to stream onto every monitor. Mason's code, the timed leak, had activated. All her files, all her crimes, were being broadcast live across the net. No, she hissed. You don't know what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I've set her free. She lunged for the console, but Claire tackled her, pinning her to the floor. It's over, Claire said coldly. You're done. No, she whispered, her eyes filled with something dark. Not fear, but rage. You think this ends with me? There are others, always others. Claire looked at me. Let's go. We ran. The alarm screamed again. The whole facility shook as the charges detonated. Fire roared behind us as we burst into the snow, the night sky glowing orange. We dove behind a ridge just as the explosion ripped through the mountain. Hours later, we stood at the edge of a frozen lake, the world quiet again. The sun was rising over the peaks, painting the snow gold. Claire stood beside me, hands in her pockets. She was right about one thing. There will always be others. Then we'll be ready, I said. She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Michael limped up behind us, holding a small satellite radio. Mason just called. The files went global. News outlets, watchdogs, even the FBI's reacting. The director's empire just collapsed. I looked up at the sunrise, feeling the weight of months finally lift from my chest. It's over, I whispered. When we returned to the States, Emily was waiting. She ran into my arms, sobbing. Dad, I saw everything online. You did it. You really did it. I held her close, tears burning in my eyes. No, I said softly. We did. Weeks later, as life slowly began to feel normal again, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photo, a black and white image of the director standing in front of a lab window, but this time the date stamp was from 2 days after the explosion. My stomach turned cold. On the back, there were just 3 words, written in red ink. See you soon.